Parents' favorite, my brother set me up for stealing the family's money. My parents kicked me out of the house. Years later, he was arrested for something illegal, and they crawled back to me for help. My so-called golden boy brother once pinned a theft on me. He accused me of stealing money from the family business. That false accusation got me thrown out of the house by our own parents. Fast forward a few years, and guess who ends up in handcuffs for some shady illegal deal? Yep, him. And just like that, the same parents who kicked me to the curb came knocking on my door, asking for help. This story revolves around that brother of mine, who's 7 years older than me. Since the very beginning, he's been the poster child of perfection, the kind of kid every parent dreams about. At least, that's how he looked on the surface. But let me tell you, behind that spotless facade was a master manipulator. The guy knew exactly how to twist things in his favor, and my parents? They were completely blind to it. His charm and well-rehearsed manners fooled them so thoroughly, they never even considered questioning him. As for me, I'm now 36 and working as an office executive in a legal firm. It's not some fancy, high-rolling job, but it's honest work. It pays the bills, and for that, I'm genuinely grateful. I've built a stable life for myself, one I never thought I'd have, especially considering where I came from. And if you knew my background, you'd probably be surprised I even made it this far. See, I was born into a well-known family with a long legacy. My great-grandfather was one of the earliest pharmaceutical manufacturers in the city. He had a bunch of kids, who then had more kids, and so on. Now we're a massive clan. That original drug manufacturing business eventually branched out into smaller operations. Today, those subunits are run by my dad, uncles, and even some second or third cousins. My father ended up with a medical warehouse, responsible for distributing medicines to retail chains and pharmacies. As for our generation, there are just two of us brothers. My older brother, the star of this twisted tale, is a doctor. Me, I'm the other one, the nobody. I didn't inherit any part of the family business, nor did I get a fancy medical degree, which was practically the family's birthright. Honestly, I don't hold any degree that's considered worthy in their eyes. Just a simple college graduate who barely made it across the finish line. Took me 5 long years to complete a 3-year program. Not my proudest achievement. Was I stupid? Maybe. Or maybe I was just a lost cause with zero confidence. And no, I'm not trying to play the victim here, but I can't ignore the role my parents played in pushing me toward failure. Like I said, my brother was always the star. Straight A, student, school champion, medal collector, you name it. He even managed to help out at Dad's warehouse while juggling school. Honestly, he's always been painted as the symbol of brilliance and virtue. Being 7 years younger, by the time I could even wrap my head around the idea of competing with him, he was already miles ahead. So I just gave up. I never even tried to chase his shadow because I knew I could never measure up. And weirdly enough, I never hated him for it. I wasn't jealous either. I genuinely didn't carry any bitterness in my heart. We had what I'd call a decent sibling relationship. Nothing dramatic, just normal. While growing up, he was usually busy doing his own thing, books, friends, helping out, always involved. Me, I kind of stayed in the background. But living under the same roof as the family genius came with a price. I was constantly compared to him, by our parents, by the relatives, even by the teachers at school. And since we went to the same school, I got the full force of it. You're his brother? Really? What happened to you? I heard that line more times than I can count. I was average, plain and simple. Not a top scorer, not a sports guy either. Just ordinary. Unlike him. I wasn't overweight or anything, but I also didn't have the kind of athletic build that got you picked for the school sports team. I kind of hovered in that awkward middle space. Never outstanding, never chosen. And because I didn't have anything I excelled at, I became an easy target. I got mocked regularly for being the kid who was good at absolutely nothing. At that point, I was desperate for a way to deal with the constant ridicule. I needed something, some way to feel like I belonged. And unfortunately, I found my escape in the wrong crowd. I started hanging around with the so-called bad boys, you know the type. And since I had access to prescription drugs thanks to my dad's warehouse, I became quite popular in that circle real fast. I was the guy who could get things, the cool, one who always had a stash. I slipped into that role far too easily. Eventually, I got caught. Twice. My parents hit the roof. I was punished, grounded, and dragged through the mud at every family gathering. They added thief to my growing list of titles. That's when I officially got branded the black sheep of the family. Looking back, maybe if they tried to understand why I was acting out instead of just punishing me, things could have gone differently. But instead of asking what was going on inside my head, they shut the door on me and labeled me a lost cause. After high school, my parents practically ordered me to enroll in a medical course. I refused flat out. I already knew I wasn't cut out for it. Studying was never my strong suit. So instead, I chose to pursue a degree in accounting, which, as you can imagine, didn't sit well with my parents. They were deeply disappointed, disgusted even. See, in my extended family, there are 11 doctors. Yeah, 11. Not to mention the cousins and relatives who are nurses, lab techs, pharmacists, you name it. In our family, anything less than a nursing degree is treated like a joke. So when I went for accounting, they treated it like I'd announced I was going to be a circus clown. My dad refused to pay a single cent toward my education. I had no choice but to take out a student loan. Just before I left for college, Dad made it very clear. He'd only be giving me pocket money until I started school. After that, I was on my own. Whatever debts I racked up, I'd have to pay them off myself. And I wasn't the kind of kid who turned that kind of insult into motivation. Some people get driven by rejection. Not me. I sank even lower. When I got to college, I fell headfirst into a downward spiral. I already knew there was no safety net waiting for me. If by some miracle I ever got any inheritance, I was sure it'd be crumbs. The real feast would be reserved for my golden brother. So I decided if I was going to fail, I might as well enjoy the fall. I embraced the chaos, found myself an even worse group of friends, got into harder substances, and fully lost control. A 3-year program stretched into 5 miserable years. I didn't work any part-time jobs, didn't try to fund my own education. I just wasted myself away in a haze of bad decisions. By the time I finished college, I had no roadmap, no plans, no goals. I drifted aimlessly for 6 more months, still living in a bubble of denial, until I got kicked out of the college dorm. That's when reality started to bite, hard. I tried applying for office jobs, but my resume was as empty as my bank account. My interview skills were terrible. My attitude? Even worse. I ended up crashing at a friend's shabby little apartment until he got tired of me and asked me to leave. From there, I moved to another buddy's couch. But I was clearly running out of places to hide. Then things really started to crumble when the bank came knocking, asking for loan payments. I could barely afford a $1 menu hamburger. How was I supposed to repay student debt? My dad had cut off financial support a long time ago, and I knew there was no help coming from that direction. I picked up whatever odd jobs I could find, things that barely kept me fed. The money I made wasn't even enough to keep a roof over my head, let alone pay back thousands in loans. I kept stalling the bank officials, making promises I couldn't keep. Then one day, 2 massive loan collectors showed up at my door. These guys weren't here for a friendly chat. They grabbed me by the collar, dragged me around like a rag doll, and told me I had exactly 15 days, 15, to come up with the money or face serious consequences. That was the moment the fear really hit me. I was terrified, and I had nowhere left to run. Out of desperation, I picked up the phone and called my mom. I was crying. I begged her to help me, just this once. Her reply? Cold as ice. She told me I deserved everything that was happening to me, and hung up. After my mom shut the door on me, figuratively and literally, I turned to the only person I'd left, my brother. By that time, he was already living the high life. A respected doctor with his own clinic, staff, and probably a waiting list of patients wrapped around the building. I didn't want to call him, but I had no one else. I swallowed my pride and explained everything. How desperate I was, how close the collectors were to dragging me to hell. He told me he needed a little time to think about it. I begged him. I told him I'd return the money as soon as I could, that this was just a lifeline, not a handout. And truth be told, I knew what I looked like on paper. A broke loser who couldn't be trusted with lunch money, let alone thousands. So if he had flat out refused to help, I might have even understood. But what he ended up doing, I never saw it coming. A week later, he called me back, said he managed to gather the money, and asked for my bank account details. I was so relieved, I didn't even think twice. I handed over everything, account number, PIN, even my online banking password. Yeah, I know. I was either completely naive or just so emotionally wrecked that I couldn't think straight. Probably both. The next day, I got a message from a bank. My account had been credited, but the amount? It wasn't just enough to cover my loan. It was 4 times more than I actually needed. I stared at the screen, stunned. Naturally, I called him, asked him why in the world he'd sent so much extra. He told me he'd liquidated one of his assets, and the whole amount got dumped into my account. Nothing to worry about, he said. He'd just take back the excess after I settle my debt. For that, he needed full access to my account again. Still riding the wave of gratitude, I gave him whatever he asked for. Just like he said, he logged in and pulled the extra funds back into his account, leaving me with just enough to pay off the loan. I felt like someone had taken a 500-pound weight off my chest. For the first time in years, I could breathe. But that breath didn't last long. An hour later, my phone rang. It was my father, and the second I picked up, he exploded on me like a madman. He wasn't just angry. He was full-on enraged, screaming and swearing and demanding I catch the first bus home. He accused me of stealing money from the family business. I was speechless. I had no idea what he was talking about. It didn't even cross my mind that my brother might have had something to do with this. Not then. I figured there had to be some mix-up, maybe a bank error, maybe a wrong transfer. But when I got home, reality hit me in the face, literally. The moment I walked through the door, Dad slapped me so hard I saw stars. And then came the verbal abuse, nonstop. They were convinced I had siphoned off funds from the family's business account and used it to pay my debts. I stood there, stunned, trying to understand how I'd gotten roped into this mess. Apparently, Dad had been monitoring the business finances and noticed something shady. When he contacted the bank, they confirmed that a large amount had been transferred to my account. He confronted my brother, and, get this, my dear brother spun a tale that I had stolen the money. That was all me. To make his story more believable, he even pulled up my bank statements to back up the lie. I was stunned, completely numb. He went into painstaking detail, walking the whole family through the so-called evidence. Every eye in the room was burning into me with shame and disgust. Cousins, uncles, aunts. The judgment was suffocating. I could barely speak. My voice trembled as I mumbled, "Bro, you were the one who transferred the money." He looked at me like I'd spoken in tongues. His expression didn't even flicker, just a flat-out denial. Said he had no clue what I was talking about, that he had nothing to do with any of it. I was desperate to clear my name, so I called the bank myself, hoping to trace the transaction. But when I asked for the details of where the money went after it left my account, the official told me it had been sent to some private account that was untraceable. No name, no identifiers. Meanwhile, the original transaction from my father's business account to my account was clearly logged. So the paper trail showed that I had received stolen money. What it didn't show was that my brother had orchestrated the whole thing. It all made sense in the worst way. He used my trust and my desperation to gain full access to my bank account. Then he cleverly funneled the stolen business funds into my name, used my credentials to make it look legit, and then siphoned it off into his own hidden account. No fingerprints, no trace, and I was left standing there holding the blame. I couldn't believe he'd sink that low just to protect himself or whatever twisted plan he had in mind. But he did, and he did it flawlessly. I pulled my brother aside, away from the chaos, and quietly begged him to come clean. "Just tell the truth," I said. But it was like talking to a wall, or worse, a con artist. He flat out denied everything, not even a flicker of guilt in his eyes. The man was a seasoned imposter, through and through. And of course, right on cue, my parents jumped in to defend him. Their golden child, their pride and joy. He could do no wrong in their eyes. A few family members, bless them, did say it didn't seem like something I would do. But even they didn't step up to support me. Not when the weight of the entire family was on the other side. They demanded I return the money, but I had no way of doing that. I didn't even know where it had gone. I had no access, no account information, nothing. I was just a pawn. Dad, in a rage, grabbed his phone and started dialing the police, ready to press charges against me. That was when my brother stepped in, looking all righteous, and stopped him. He said it would tarnish the family's reputation. How noble, right? At first, I thought maybe that was his guilt finally surfacing. But no, that wasn't remorse. It was strategy. He knew that if law enforcement got involved, there'd be digging, real digging, and they might uncover the whole truth, that he'd framed me, that he had orchestrated the theft from start to finish. He spun the whole thing to look like he was protecting me, told our dad he was doing me a favor by keeping it quiet. Then he turned to me and said the least I could do in return was disappear from their lives forever. Imagine that, being innocent, yet told to vanish like a criminal. I felt like dirt in their eyes, like some stray they'd allowed to sit at their table for too long. I couldn't take it. I broke. I bolted out of that house, ran through the streets, my face soaked in tears. I couldn't even see where I was going. I was sobbing so hard, people on the sidewalk must have thought I was losing my mind. And maybe I was just a little. That evening still haunts me. Eventually, I collapsed on a street corner, just dropped to the sidewalk like a broken doll, and cried until my throat hurt. After a while, I pulled myself up, wandered aimlessly for what felt like hours, and then caught a bus back to my tiny condo. That night, I made a promise to myself. I swore I would never return to that house. Never again let them reduce me to nothing. From that day on, I took full responsibility for my life. It took me 8 years to climb out of the pit I was pushed into. 8 long, brutal years to build something remotely close to a stable life. And no, it wasn't some overnight success story. I didn't win the lottery. There were no shortcuts, just pain, perseverance, and a whole lot of fury. That anger kept me alive. It gave me purpose. I wanted revenge, not the Hollywood kind, but real justice. I wanted to expose my brother for what he was. I wanted to watch the pedestal they'd put him on crumble beneath him. But I also knew I didn't have the power to take on a family like mine. They had wealth, status, and connections. I had none of that. Heck, I couldn't even afford therapy. Over the years, I buried the pain. I locked those memories in a mental vault and did my best to forget it all. And I almost succeeded, until a few days ago when the past came knocking. It was my sister-in-law. Yeah, his wife. She turned up at my workplace without warning. I didn't even recognize her at first. I'd cut ties with everyone in my family, blocked them all on social media, deleted their numbers, scrubbed my life clean of them. So when I saw her standing in front of me, it felt like a ghost had walked in. Turns out, she had gone through quite the scavenger hunt to track me down. And she wasn't there for a reunion. She needed help, my help. Her husband, my dear brother, was in serious trouble. He was under investigation for selling prohibited drugs. Not just dealing, manufacturing, and distributing them. A full-blown illegal operation. I asked her flat out if she knew about what had happened between us, how he destroyed me. She nodded, said she knew everything. Then she dropped the bombshell. She admitted that my brother had used the stolen money, the money he took in my name, to set up a secret side business dealing in illicit drugs. That's what the funds went into. Apparently, someone reported the operation to the authorities. He got tipped off by an accomplice and shut it down a few months ago. But the investigation had already started. It was only a matter of time before the cops closed in. I was stunned. My hands went cold. So I asked her, out of all the people in our sprawling family, why come to me? Her answer was almost laughable. She said the police had frozen all of my father's warehouses, and they were now under investigation too. The authorities believed Dad might have been involved, or at the very least aware. Their bank accounts were locked, assets tied up, and all those uncles, cousins, and high-horse relatives, they were backing away fast, trying to cover their own tracks. No one wanted to get dragged into the scandal. So that left me, because I work at a legal firm. She figured I could pull some strings, maybe get a lawyer to defend my brother. The same brother who ruined my life. Oh, really? Now they want my help? After all this time? After everything he did to me? The lies, the public shaming, the way he had me kicked out like garbage tossed to the curb. And now they think I'll swoop in and save the day? His wife begged me to reconsider for the sake of her children. Her voice cracked with emotion, and for a second, I felt the sting of sympathy. But then I remembered They stood by silently when I was framed and thrown to the wolves. So I calmly told her the truth. As far as I'm concerned, my family doesn't exist anymore. And then I asked her to leave. Still, I couldn't shake the thoughts swirling in my head after she left. My brain wouldn't quiet down. And sure enough, the very next day, my phone rang again. This time, it was my mother. She sounded soft, fragile. She pleaded with me to help. She said something about family sticking together, about how we needed to support each other during hard times. I laughed. I asked her, where was this so-called family love all these years? Where was this compassion when I was crying on the floor, begging for someone to believe me? Where's her loyalty when I was tossed out and labeled a disgrace? She told me to let the past go, that now was the time to be united. I couldn't believe her nerve. The hypocrisy was staggering. I told her not to call me again and hung up. But of course, she called again an hour later. This time, she left a voice note. Don't be a baby, she said. Act like an adult for once. Right? I'm the baby. The immature one. The truth is, I don't intend to lift a finger for any of them. But despite everything, I don't feel good watching them suffer either. That's the twisted part. I spent years dreaming of the day they'd get what they deserved. I rehearsed scenarios in my head where I'd watch them fall apart. And now that karma is finally paying a visit, I don't feel joy. I feel conflicted. Update 1. The response to my post has completely blown me away. I'm honestly overwhelmed by the messages, the empathy, the kindness, everything. It means more than I can say. And you're right. All of you are right. My brother earned every bit of what's happening to him. And my parents? They had it coming too. Call me cold, call me cruel, but I decided to turn this situation around. This was my moment, not to help, but to make them feel what I felt, to avenge the humiliation they carved into my soul. So when my mom called again, I told her I'd come over to talk things out. Her voice lit up with hope. You'd think I just said I was coming home for Thanksgiving. When I got there, they welcomed me with open arms. Suddenly, they were all warm smiles, kind words, and false concern. I cut right through it, told them I wasn't there for any emotional performance. My brother had moved back in with his wife and kids after the authorities froze all his assets. His own home was sealed under investigation, so he'd slithered back to our parents' place for shelter. Everyone was begging, pleading for help. Then he cried. He tried to hug me, like that would fix anything. I raised my hand, stopping a mid-step. I told him to stay away. I reminded them all how I begged for help once, years ago, and got nothing but betrayal in return. I reminded them how I was labeled a thief, dragged through the mud, and kicked out while they all watched in silence. My brother, through teary eyes, finally said he was sorry, claimed he regretted what he did. I told him straight, your crocodile tears won't do a damn thing here. If he wanted to make it right, I told him he'd have to do what he once forced me to do. Confess in front of everyone. I wanted justice, not behind closed doors, not whispered in corners. I was humiliated in front of the entire extended family. And if he wanted my help, he needed to return the favor with a confession, publicly. That's when my mom snapped. She shouted that I was making a spectacle out of their suffering. I looked her dead in the eye and said, not my problem. You want help? This is the price. They had no choice. One by one, they started calling relatives. Most didn't pick up. Some ignored the calls altogether, likely wanting to avoid any link to the legal mess. Others flat out refused, afraid of getting tied up in the investigation. Eventually, Mom started telling them it was about me, that I was asking my brother to confess something. That did the trick. A few uncles and aunts agreed to show up, partly out of genuine concern, partly out of sheer curiosity. The gossip-hungry ones? They were already on their way, probably with popcorn in their bags. But it was enough. Enough to make noise. Enough to set the stage. When everyone arrived, my brother stood there, fidgeting, eyes red and puffy. And then he said it. He confessed, right there in front of everyone, that he was the one who stole money from the family business. That he used that money to fund a secret drug operation. That he framed me, his own brother, to take the fall. I looked him straight in the face and asked him the question I'd waited years to say aloud. Why? Why would you do something like that to your own brother? He finally gave me the truth, or at least what he claimed was the truth. He said Dad never would have approved of his business idea. So when he saw me, broken and desperate, he decided to use me. I was the perfect fall guy, vulnerable, disconnected, and already labeled as the family failure. It made me an easy target to pin everything on while he chased his ambitions. That's how he built his empire. He set up his own illegal manufacturing unit, opened a flashy clinic, bought a house, all before hitting 30. And while the whole family showered him with praise for his so-called hard work, the truth is every inch of his success was built on betrayal. I remember looking around that room, scanning the faces that once turned away from me in disgust. Then one voice cut through. It was my uncle, the only one who ever showed me a little kindness growing up. He stood up and said, "I knew it. I always had a feeling he wasn't a thief." He apologized for not standing by me back then. Said he was proud that I'd lifted myself up from the bottom and hadn't let it crush me. And that's the thing about people. No one wants to be near you when you're drowning. But once you manage to crawl out of the mud, they start calling you strong. My dad, still acting like he had the upper hand, looked at me and said, "All right, we did what you asked. Now help us get out of this." I told him I'd speak to someone at my firm, see if any attorney would take the case. But I made it clear it wouldn't be pro bono. That flipped his switch. He exploded, yelling that if they had money to hire a lawyer, they wouldn't need my help in the first place. "Why even come to you?" he shouted. I just shrugged and said, "Good luck then. What do they think I do? Pay out of my own pocket to save the guy who wrecked my life? To help the same man who left me humiliated, homeless, and abandoned?" Dad snapped. Told my mom, Linda, not to bother anymore. "We wasted too much time begging this piece of shit," he said. "How can we expect help from someone who's always been a useless ass?" I looked him in the eye and said, "At least I'm not a fraud." Even after everything, after the truth came out, they still stood behind their precious golden boy, blinded by loyalty, still convinced that I was the mistake in the family. So I gave them one last warning. I told them if they didn't back away from him now, they'd go down with him. And then I walked out. My work was done. I got what I came for. The truth had been dragged into the light, and they were finally being eaten alive by the same monster they once worshipped. I could have helped them, maybe even made things a little easier. But the second I saw them defending him again, after all that, I knew they didn't deserve a damn thing from me. They disowned me once. Let them live with that. Update 2. After that face-off, a lot of my extended family started calling me. Cousins, uncles, aunts, they all apologized for staying silent when I needed them most. I appreciated the words, but I told them the truth. It doesn't matter now. No one stood up for me when it counted. Apologies after the storm don't fix the damage. That's when I found out my brother had already been arrested a month ago. He was charged with manufacturing and selling drugs that weren't FDA approved. Real dangerous stuff. He got sentenced to 8 years in prison. His attorney is still trying to reduce the sentence, but from what I hear, it's not looking good. My dad, interestingly, wasn't arrested. The investigators ruled out his direct involvement. But life didn't exactly cut him a break either. His warehouse was seized and shut down for over half a year. Business came to a complete halt. Worse, the health department placed him under constant scrutiny. Unannounced inspections, legal red tape, constant stress. And no one in the pharmaceutical world wants to be associated with that kind of scandal. He lost his regular clients, his distributors, even his reputation. Some relatives told me that my parents aged 10 years in just the last 6 months. Stress has hollowed them out. Now they regret ever putting all their faith in their golden boy. But even now, they still don't talk about me. No apology, no remorse. Not a single word about the way they treated me. And you know what? That's fine. I don't need them anymore. One of Dad's closest brothers, the uncle who always stood beside him, told me recently that my parents are now planning to sell off everything they own and disappear somewhere quiet. Maybe a secluded part of town, maybe even the countryside. Somewhere they can live without being stared at, judged, or whispered about every time they step outside. The shame from neighbors, the whispers from relatives, the weight of what they once ignored. It finally caught up with them. As for my sister-in-law, with my brother behind bars, she packed up and moved in with her parents. She had nowhere else to go. Everything she'd built was tied to my brother, and now it's all gone. Do I feel thrilled about all this? Like I got the ultimate revenge? No, but I am relieved that the truth saw daylight, that the mask finally slipped, and that justice, though it took its time, finally showed up at their door. Now, time to turn the page. Story 2. Caught my college girlfriend cheating with frat guys at a party. Yeah, this one's a little less tragic, but no less personal. My girlfriend and I met during our freshman orientation week. It was one of those week-long events designed to help first-year students ease into college life. We just so happened to land in the same orientation group, and for some reason, we clicked right away. There was a dance at the end of orientation week, kind of like a casual kickoff to the semester. We went together, my first real college date, and that night, well, let's just say we took a big step. We lost our virginity to each other. Embarrassing? Yeah. Sweet? Honestly, yeah. Looking back, it was clumsy and awkward, but also kind of innocent in the best way. We dated all through our first and second year. 2 years of being each other's person. We weren't thinking about the future. Not really. No talk of rings or settling down. But we were close. Comfortable. I love her in the way you love someone when you're young and still figuring yourself out. Now, our school had a huge Greek life presence. Frats, sororities, mixers. It was a whole culture. Personally, I always thought that stuff was weird. Loud, performative, cliquish. So I stayed far away from all of it. I had zero interest in rushing any fraternity. But her? She was obsessed with joining a certain sorority. I mean, she had been dreaming about it since high school. She picked this college because of it. So, during the summer between our first and second year, she finally got her chance. She rushed the house she had always wanted and got in. I was genuinely happy for her. I knew how much it meant. But deep down, I started feeling a little off about the whole thing. This particular sorority? It was the exact type of group I couldn't stand. Every girl in it looked and acted like a carbon copy of the next. Perfect smiles, perfect outfits, perfect social lives. My girlfriend, once vibrant and unique, was slowly being absorbed into that hive. She got busier, fussed. Between the endless sorority events, meetings, parties, and her actual classes, I barely saw her. We used to talk every day, texts, calls, dumb memes. After she joined, days would go by with nothing. She was always off at some fundraiser, or planning a theme party, or volunteering somewhere. It felt like I was being left behind, like I was watching our relationship slowly fade into the background of her shiny new life. We finally grabbed lunch one day, just the two of us. I brought up. I told her how I felt like we were drifting apart, that she seemed different, distant. She reassured me, told me it was only temporary, said once she settled into the rhythm of the sorority life, things would go back to normal. That the last thing she wanted was for us to break up. And during that same lunch, she started telling me about some of the weird rules her sorority had. They expected their sisters to maintain a certain image, inside and outside the house. Everything from how they dressed to who they dated was expected to represent the values of the sorority. She wasn't even supposed to hang out with guys from certain social groups. They had this whole bizarre moral code they were expected to uphold 24/7. Weeks went by, but things between us, they didn't improve. Not even a little dot. I still had feelings for her. That hadn't changed. Even though the closeness we once had all but vanished, and despite the widening gap that grew between us after she joined that sorority, I still cared. I still wanted to be with her. But every day, the space between us stretched just a little further. I didn't want to be that guy, the one who gives ultimatums or tells someone not to chase their dreams. I didn't want to hold her back. But if I'm honest, it was exhausting. I felt like I was trying to hold on to something that kept slipping through my fingers. Then one night, she texted me. She invited me to a big annual frat party, some well-known Greek life event on campus. And let me be clear here, I hated Greek life. Every bit of it. I had zero interest in going to that party. But still, I wanted to see her, even if just for a little while. I had a campus work-study job at the time. Most weekends, I helped run events for undergrads, screenings, activities, small stuff. That night, I was scheduled to monitor a movie night. I told her I'd try to come, but only if I could get off work early. Honestly, I didn't think I'd make it. But then, something unexpected happened. The movie was a total flop. Barely halfway through, students started leaving in waves. Eventually, the auditorium was almost empty, and I got the green light to wrap things up early. I had the rest of the night free, so I decided to head over to the party. I figured maybe we could spend a little time together, even if it was just a short while. When I got there, the place was packed. Wall-to-wall people, loud music, red Solo cups everywhere. Your typical frat house chaos. I didn't know anyone. I was just weaving through the crowd, awkwardly looking for one familiar face. I spotted a few girls from her sorority, but didn't feel comfortable approaching them. I wasn't part of that world, and I already felt like an outsider. So I started moving through the house, hoping I'd run into her. Eventually, I made my way upstairs, where there were a few bedrooms. My heart was pounding. I didn't even want to imagine what could be behind those doors, but something pushed me to keep looking. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I'd find her just hanging out with some friends. But deep down, something in me knew. I opened a couple of doors. Nothing. Then, I opened one more. And that's when everything fell apart. She was in there. My girlfriend. The person I thought I knew. She was kissing one guy, while another one stood behind her, kissing her neck. She was topless. They were tangled up, and it was painfully obvious what was about to happen. I froze. For a second, I just stood there. My brain couldn't process what my eyes were seeing. The guy behind her noticed me first. He yelled at me to get out. That's when she turned her head. Her eyes widened. She rushed toward me, panicking, trying to explain. I didn't want to hear it. I slammed the door in her face and walked out. Down the stairs. Out the house. Back into the night. I didn't even know where I was going. I just needed to be anywhere but there. She started blowing on my phone almost immediately. Calls. Messages. Begging for me to talk. But I didn't respond. I couldn't. I was too stunned. Too hurt. A part of me had already feared something was going on. I could feel us drifting, the emotional silence between us growing louder by the week. But knowing something might be wrong is different than seeing it. Nothing prepares you for that. Being cheated on messes with your head. It doesn't just hurt, it shatters your sense of what was real. The next morning, I sent her a text. Told her I didn't want to hear a single word of explanation. We were done. There was no excuse that could justify what she did. Nothing that would make that moment disappear from my memory. I blocked her number and tried to move on. I gave myself a few days to sulk, to feel sorry for myself. Then I forced myself to get back to real life. But I couldn't shake one detail from my mind, the sorority code of conduct she had told me about during that lunch a few weeks earlier. The one about values. About representing the sorority with pride. About avoiding men who didn't fit the image. About dressing a certain way, acting a certain way, being a certain kind of woman. Yeah, that code. I was about to use it against her. With all the absurd rules that sorority enforced, the ones about image, behavior, and representing values, I couldn't help but think that cheating on your boyfriend in a frat house threesome probably wasn't something they'd be proud to promote. And I knew just how much that sorority meant to her. She talked about it constantly. It wasn't just a club for her. It was her identity, her pride, her future network. So yeah, I wanted